Age of the Foxglove, Ingobnito, by Lark Sabre. Read by Lark Sabre. Chapter 28. The Job, Part 3. Hunt didn't have a clear conception of how the fairy dust heist would unfold, but he couldn't have predicted how it all went down. After Lucky's lucky escape from a near mauling by F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E, the rest of the moonlit tiptoe to Old Man Horrocks's garden was plain sailing, which wasn't saying much given that Lefty's posse only had to nip under one more fence to get where they needed to be. And with the doubling in height a goblin enjoyed over a fairy, it had been Gambino's play to locate Damselfly City using the DFCC tree as a landmark. Damselfly City itself had been deserted when the Mobolino crew hit town, partly because it was night, and partly because the fairy citizens were cowering inside their toadstool abodes, not aware that F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E had it all in hand. The fairy dust bank was a fairly nondescript toadstool, other than the fact it had a helpful sign over its entrance emblazoned with the words Damselfly City Fairy Dust Bank in rather fancy calligraphy. Fairy writing was very elegant and fiddly, rather like the handwriting of a girl in Hunter's class, Nina Churchwater, who had a bulging W.H. Smith pencil case full of posh stationery, including some fluorescent felt tips that smelt of fruit. But the bank was closed, the sun having set, and the fairy-sized entrance only reached the Godber's waist. So instead of charging into the bank yelling, "Hands up, everybody, this is a stick-up," in an exciting outlaw style, the goblins used their superior strength and size to barge the door open and crawled in on their hands and knees, looking for the fairy dust vault by F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E light. So, is this what you did the last couple of times you robbed the Finkerbells of their enchanted powder then left? Inquired Hunter, as the quartet bumbled around in the dark in single file on all fours, like a line of myopic huskies pulling a phantom sled.
Yeah, that's right. Ever since we had the Bugsies, we've been magic-proof, so there ain't goo-goo-gadoo-gats them Finkerbells could do about it. But it ain't exactly glamorous. Hey, tell John Gobby to back up. I gone down the wrong corridor.
Go back, guys. We're going to try the other corridor. Lefty's took a wrong turn. So why did we need the Hooter Huffers if F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E, them fairy feds, don't pose any threat left? Hunter questioned of his Gabbo, who was now at the back of the goblin centipede, whilst John Gobby shuffled his greeny-grey gobsteria in reverse out of the corridor.
Hey, a gobster never leaves home without his Hooter Huffer, capiche?
Answered the Gabbo to his hot snot new sewer soldier, or at least that's who he thought he was gobbo-gabbling to.
Besides, sometimes we like to take pot shots at them fairy feds if they're buzzing like mosquitoes overhead. And one time, they set some rinky-dink for F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E robot squirrel on us. Can you believe that? So we had to blast away out that time. Come prepared, that's what I say. But yeah, looks like them Finkerbells have gone yellow. It's gonna be easier than picking the boogers out of a snoring gob's schnozzle this time.
Lip-syncing leprechauns. Godbird proverbs are utterly ixzilla, thought Hunter, cringing in the corridor, trying to keep ahead of Lefty's reversing butt as Bogsy beams bounced around. Don't be so sure it'll be quite so simple this time, Lefty, old mate. The crew successfully managed to reverse into the main reception area of the fairy dust bank, and John Gobby led the way up the right corridor, the one to the vault. John Gobby was lead myopic husky this time, and a more successful lead myopic husky he proved to be too, as he was soon passing a message down this convoy of crawling goblins that he had located the back room lined with shelves of dinky piratical treasure chests in which the fairies stored their fairy dust. It wasn't much of a reflection on John Gobby's competence, however, what with a process of elimination already having guaranteed he was going in the right direction.
Hey, Lucky, pass it on. Tell Lefty we hit the jack gob. Hey, Joey, pass it on. Tell Lefty we hit the jack gob.
Hey, Lefty, pass it on. Now, hang on a minute. Scratch that. Lucky says that John Gobby says we hit the... Before Hunter could finish reciting a premature word of victory down this bent-over underworld chain of command, the bank corridor was plunged into darkness. The lights from the Bogsy amulets were no more. Kaput, fizzled out with a vengeance. Dr. Nutkinstein must have triggered the anti-Bogsy in Hunter's own amulet, which meant this darkness was the result of the Bogsy deactivating dampening field. It was show time.
What's going on with this F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E Bogsy? Magaba Mia! What a time for it to go into Fritz!
Exclaimed Lefty in blind exasperation.
Boss, it's dark in here.
remarked John Gobby, displaying his astute observational skills.
I can see that, you mooklin, or rather I can't. It ain't a good time to be spreading my sprouts, John Gobby,
threatened Lefty, thoroughly rebuking the notion John Gobby's observational skills were anything like astute. Though John Gobby wasn't wrong, it was blacker than Uncle Tail's leather jacket with the studded shoulder pads in the bank. But as suddenly as the bank had become luminously challenged, it was then flooded with light. The corridors, the vault, the lobby and reception, all of it bathed in a dazzling, searing white. Fairies don't actually need electricity. Their light bulbs are screwed into the ceiling, as the ceiling is an ideal place for lamps in general. But they're not physically wired into anything. The fairies just wave their wands and lights and lamps switch on, which was a good job, as even old man Horrocks might notice dull-sized electrical pylons popping up at the bottom of his garden, though that would depend on whether his favourite retro game show was on TV or not. There stood Agent Stella Wildflower, bursting with confidence and brimming with authority, in the doorway of the Damselfly City Fairy Dust Bank, the door hanging off its hinges courtesy of the Mobilino's big brown key, i.e. Lefty booting it. One hand was on her pink-trousered hip, and the other held her trusty wand, her pink-jacketed arm bent at the elbow. To Hunter's mind, Agent Wildflower looked like she was about to sing the nursery rhyme, I'm a little teapot, short and stout. It's a fairy fed dame. What are we going to do, boss? The bugs is down, panicked Lucky, the evening having already been fairly disastrous as far as he was concerned. John Gobby was also in a tears and started backing up out of the corridor in an unsynchronized fashion, giving Lucky a mouthful of goblin buttock.
Get your greeny grey gluteus maximus out of my gazoo, protested Lucky.
There was more sort of confirming John Gobby's greeny grey gluteus maximus was indeed muffling Lucky's gazoo. Lefty was the one at the top of the vault's corridor, nearest the more spacious bank lobby, so he manoeuvred around on all fours to face Agent Wildflower. He might not have been able to stand up, but he was perfectly capable of grabbing the hooter huffer hanging from his bent shoulder and sticking the input end to his permanently loaded nostril.
Hey, use that thing about Guma I shot down from the skies near that damselfly dump that day we was casing the giant. I hit the bullseye that day, and I's gonna waste your pretty little wing for an encore now, too.
I think not, you goblin creep, Agent Wildflower admonished the goblin Gabbo. This is a Sparkle Stick 44, the most powerful wand in the world. So before you go with your hooter huffer, you need to ask yourself, do you feel lucky, goblin? Well, do you?
Excuse me, Miss Finkerbell. My handle's literally Lucky, and I ain't that lucky,
said Lucky from behind Hunter. And from what Hunter had seen, it was true. Lucky's name seemed more of a curse than anything. But then Hunter had never hunted anything either, not so much as a bargain. So what was in a name? Well, you should all change your names to Grave Misfortune now then. A hooter huffer's not much use to you if you don't have arms, or indeed noses, replied Agent Wildflower witheringly, and with that ominous statement of intent, she waved her Sparkle Stick 44, apparently the most powerful wand in the world. A powdery golden nebula of fairy dust encased the Mobilinos, including the undercover agent, which seemed a bit unfair, though he knew F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E didn't want to blow his cover just yet. That thought was little consolation to Hunter, however, when he later contemplated the transformation wrought upon him, courtesy of his supposed partner/handler at the Fairy Spy Agency. Fairies could be fairy weather friends, it had to be said. Lambadering leprechauns, what's happening to us? I can't feel my arms or legs, and all I can hear is my own voice in my head. And worst of all, I'm nearly blind. All I can make out is a vague pinky red glow, like when you squeeze your eyelids tight on a summer's day. Have the lights been killed again? What's she done to us? Hunter could not perceive it, but he and the other goblins had been magicked into common garden earthworms, minus arms or legs or ears, and possessing only very basic, rudimentary sight, just the ability to detect differing intensities of light. It wasn't much of a reward for all the risky undercover work he'd undertaken for F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E, but fairies were mingy give and mostly take folk by nature. Being the only creatures left on Earth with the ability to wield magic had created a sense of entitlement. Agent Wildflower beheld her handiwork, or rather wandiwork, and mouthed an apology to the worm that was formerly Agent Hobby. But she knew how utterly devoid of senses earthworms were, so she didn't launch into any long, sorrowful spiel. Besides, she justified Agent Hobby's unpleasant metamorphosis with the dictum that F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E. agents are expected to take a few hits in the line of duty. And double besides, BB sides, she had to make the most of the time Dr. Nutkenstein's anti-Bogsy had brought the Guardians of Damselfly City to do their job, which was, well, guarding Damselfly City. She was sure Agent Hobby would understand once he was back in the land of the unwormy. With a gesture from her star-crowned wand, Agent Wildflower levitated the Vermicious Quartet out of the bank like they were the levitating leprechauns and one of Agent Hobby's very own catchphrases. Outside the bank, Puckington X hovered in the cool night air. Next to him, standing with the remote control box for the anti-Bogsy in his hands, twiddling a tiny joystick and tapping some tiny buttons, was Dr. Nutkenstein. Beside the inventor lumbered Nutkenstein's monster, a.k.a. Rustentuft, the cyborg squirrel. Well, the experiment was ein gross success. F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E. for the win, yeah? Proclaimed Dr. Nutkenstein proudly. But we need to act like the win now and give these kobolds das Boot out of the Damselflugen City schnell. The anti-Bogsy Dampenwelt is unstable. Yes, a stonking great big W for F.O.X.G.L.O.V.E. What? Agreed Puckington X. How long do we have, Wildflower? The spell will wear off presently, sir. So like Dr. Nutkenstein said, I think, we need to get these godbirds as far away from Damselfly City ASAP, just in case the Bogsies come back online. Sir, is now the time to extract Agent Hobby from the field of operations? For him to stop being Joey Pumpkins, I mean? Asked Agent Wildflower, hoping her new partner's ordeal would be short-lived. Yes, I was mulling this over, and I think there's a chance this Joey Pumpkins persona might still prove a useful asset for us. How about we extract Agent Hobby a little later, without giving the game away, eh, Wildflower? It really is a most sterling mask, and he really is a most sterling agent. So it would be a shame to only use both of them just the once, don't you think? Whatever you say, sir. So we pick up 2 worms each then, and fly them to next door's garden before they start reverting back to Godbers? Oh, I'd rather not, Wildflower. They don't call me Yuckington X, you know. I don't much fancy getting my hands all slimy, thank you very much. Do you have any ideas, Doctor? Ja, Frau Wildflower, Herr X. Ich do have the brainstorm, being ein Ubergenius. Herr Rustentuft, do the honors, mein Squirrel Schnucky Putzi Dirk Technic. Rustentuft jerkily marched forward, bent down, and gathered up the earthworms who had once been the Mobolino fairy dust thieves. 2 worms draped over each arm as if they were tinsel, and Rustentuft was in the middle of putting up the Christmas decks. He then stood upright, his mechanical arms straightening out and beginning to furiously spin around in a double windmill punch motion. Round and round they rotated at a blistering, entrancing pace, red and silver circular blurs, like 2 unfiery Catherine wheels, until both arms suddenly stopped in unison at the top of the arc, catapulting the 3 vermified goblins and 1 vermified Ingobnito boy high into the air, impossibly, olympically high. Like the famous flying snakes of Asia, which throw themselves from jungle tree to surprise prey or save themselves the exhausting business of slithering everywhere on their scaly stomachs, the earthworms formed wiggly, rippling, undulating S-shapes as they ascended like angelic candy shoelaces through the night air, over Old Man Horrocks' fence and into the garden next door. Agent Hobby will be all right, won't he, sir? Asked Agent Wildflower guiltily. Oh yes, he'll be fine and dandy, totally toodly skibs. Worms are practically indestructible, don't you know? You could chop them in half, and you'll just create 2 new itty-bitty worms. What? Though best we magic him up a medal or something when you pick him up later, eh, Wildflower? Humans love shiny things. They're like mammalian magpies. We don't really want him harbouring a grudge, especially when he's human size again. What?